Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into one of the most elaborately maintained illusions in European history, a world so committed to appearing effortless that it employed 12 people to prove it. Regency England, 1812. The wealthy are comfortable, celebrated, and in debt. Not just in debt, spectacularly, fashionably, architecturally in debt. With peacocks. If one of you suggested this one, thank you, genuinely. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of darkly affectionate tour through the lives of people who had everything except plumbing. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. I am always delighted to know. Lights off, blanket up, fan on if you have one. The bedroom you're about to wake up in smells like rose water, old candle wax, and a very faint suggestion of mildew. Have you ever wondered how many people it takes to get a rich person out of bed? What it actually feels like to wash your face in water cold enough to reconsider your entire morning? How do you tie something that has its own written instructions and still looks wrong? Would you know which servant to thank, and whether thanking them at all was the done thing? Could you survive a family breakfast where every compliment is load-bearing? And if a peacock refused to display its feathers on schedule, whose fault was that, exactly? Whether anyone ever asked the peacock? Congratulations! You have just woken up in a very large, very cold bedroom in Regency England, 1812. There are 3 people in the room already. You were not aware of this until now. Good luck. You do not wake up. You are woken up. Somewhere before 6 in the morning, a housemaid has already been working for 2 hours, lighting fires, hauling water, managing the household infrastructure that makes your morning possible. Now she is outside your bedroom door holding a porcelain basin of water so cold it could startle a corpse into reconsideration. She knocks, enters, sets the basin on the washstand, and draws the curtains in one continuous and unstoppable sequence. None of this is optional, and none of it is quiet. This is the first service of your day. The room smells like rose water, furniture polish, the faint suggestion of mildew, and last night's candle wax, which is a combination that sounds worse than it is, but only barely. The fire is already going, which is the one mercy. You are lying in a bed that has been made around your body for years, in a house run by approximately 40 people, whose entire professional purpose is to ensure that you are never inconvenienced by anything as ordinary as managing your own life. This is called having a household. It is also called not knowing where the kitchen is. Now, let's talk about the basin. The water in it is cold, because there is no hot water on demand, no pipes, no taps, no infrastructure for that particular comfort. Hot water exists, but it must be heated downstairs, poured into a separate vessel, carried up at least one staircase, and delivered before it becomes merely lukewarm. The housemaid did not bring hot water. The housemaid brought what she could manage at this hour, which is cold water and professionalism. You wash your face. The soap is approximately the size of a hamster and has the texture of fine sandpaper. It gets the job done in the same way that a court-martial gets the job done. This is where the valet enters. If you are a man of the house, the valet has opinions about every aspect of your appearance, and he is correct about all of them, and he will not say this out loud, but you will know. He brings your morning coat, your linen, your gleaming boots, and a cravat that has to be tied at a mathematically improbable angle, using a method that someone once wrote a pamphlet about. The pamphlet was not a joke. There were multiple editions. Getting dressed takes the better part of 40 minutes, involves at least 2 people, and produces a result that will be evaluated by strangers in a garden later this morning. Meanwhile, across the hall, a lady's maid is performing the same function with different equipment. Tortoise-shell combs, boar bristle brushes, scented oils applied in a specific order for reasons that made sense to someone. Hair is pinned, curled, and arranged according to a logic that is 1 part fashion, 1 part engineering, and 1 part quiet negotiation between you and the maid about what is actually achievable before breakfast. The maid has been doing this longer than you have been awake. She has a view on the subject. She. Of course, none of this feels like service when you are in the middle of it. It feels like a morning. The servants move around you with the practiced efficiency of people who have memorized a route, and you stand in the center of it, like a person being assembled. The basin is removed. The towel is replaced. Fresh candles are positioned for the dressing table mirror, because natural light is what other people use. By the time you are fully dressed, at least 6 people have touched something in your immediate vicinity, and you have not yet spoken to any of them about anything except whether the boots are sufficiently shined. They are sufficiently shined. They are always sufficiently shined. The valet has a reputation to maintain. You wash your face in cold water drawn from a pump and carried across 3 rooms of Persian carpet, and this is considered a luxury. The water sits in a porcelain basin at approximately the temperature of a polite English apology, present, technically, but offering very little. You have a bar of soap, roughly the size of a hamster, a washcloth with the texture of determined ambition, and no running water of any kind. Your entire morning hygiene infrastructure fits on one small stand. You use all of it. Let's talk about the soap. So, it is milled and scented, which means it cost more than a farmhand earns in a week, and it is still gone in a fortnight. The scent is lavender, or possibly rose, or possibly the ghost of lavender that once passed through a room where someone mentioned roses. The washcloth does its job without enthusiasm. The porcelain basin holds the water with an air of quiet disapproval, as though it too was expecting something warmer. Now the grooming tools. On the stand beside the basin, a tortoiseshell comb, a boar bristle brush, a small glass bottle of scented oil, and a tin of pomade that smells like the inside of a very confident gentleman's hat. Your lady's maid, or your valet, depending on the situation, has arranged all of these in a specific order that has not been discussed but must not be disturbed. You touch them in the correct sequence. Nobody explains the sequence. You simply know hair, in this era, is not washed daily. This is not a sign of neglect. This is a sign of sense. Because washing your hair means heating water, and heating water means coordinating 3 people, a fireplace, and a schedule that already has no room in it. Instead, you brush, oil, and arrange. The pomade handles the rest. Your hair will be powdered, pinned, curled, or otherwise managed into something that communicates wealth without communicating effort, which is the defining goal of all Regency personal presentation. The brush has been doing this longer than your current lady's maid. It has opinions. Of course, there is also your teeth, a small loth, a tooth powder made of chalk, charcoal, and what appears to be optimism. You rub it across your teeth with the cloth in small circles, and rinse with water that tastes faintly of the journey it just took across your bedroom. This is, by the standards of 1812, rigorous dental hygiene. The alternative is the barber-surgeon, who operates with pliers and a firm grip and sends a bill afterward. You brush more carefully. Meanwhile, the scent of the room is doing its own work. Last night's candle wax has cooled into something almost sweet. There is rose water on the nightstand, a faint trace of furniture polish in the curtains, and underneath all of it, the low, persistent note of a house that is very old and has absorbed many winters. You add your own soap and pomade to the mix. The room accepts the contribution without comment. This entire process, the cold water, the small soap, the careful teeth, the brushed and oiled hair, takes roughly 20 minutes and requires at least one other person's active participation. In the modern day, you would call this a bad morning at a campsite. Here, it is the beginning of a day that will be described as comfortable. You need professional assistance with your hair. Not because you lack capable hands, but because the standards of Regency male grooming have achieved a complexity that places them beyond the reach of one person working alone. Your valet arrives with scented oils, a boar bristle brush, pomades in 2 different consistencies, and a tortoiseshell comb, that costs more than most people earn in a month. The goal is to appear effortlessly natural, which takes approximately 45 minutes of deliberate construction. You have seen what happens when men attempt this alone. It is not a look anyone recommends. Let's talk about pomade. There are two kinds on your dressing table, one light, one heavy, each with a specific purpose and a specific order of application that your valet understands, and you do not. The light pomade goes in first, to smooth. The heavy pomade comes second, to set. Between them, there is a brief window in which your hair smells like a French garden and behaves like a small, cooperative animal. The tortoiseshell comb moves through in sections. You are not permitted to help. Now the style itself. In 1812, the fashionable male haircut is called the Brutus, which is a short, deliberately tousled arrangement meant to suggest that you have just returned from something vigorous and classical. It is the Regency equivalent of a gym selfie. Achieving it requires your valet to brush, section, tease, and apply product in a specific sequence, then disarrange everything slightly, then reassess. The final result looks like you did nothing. The process behind it is the sort of thing that would benefit from a formal diagram. Of course, women have their own version of this problem, and it is considerably worse. A lady's hair is not merely groomed, it is engineered. Your female counterpart sits for upwards of an hour, while her lady's maid constructs a style involving pins, ribbons, heated tongs, and a quantity of paper curlers that spent the night wound tight enough to ensure nobody slept well. The heated tongs are iron, warmed directly in the fire, tested on a scrap of cloth, and applied to hair with a degree of optimism that the gap between those two surfaces probably doesn't warrant. This is where the scented oils earn their place. After the tongs, after the pins, after the ribbon is threaded through at a precise angle that will need to be redone twice, a small amount of oil is applied to suppress the evidence of effort. The whole arrangement is then set with a light dusting of powder, or in some households, not powdered at all, full powder having fallen out of fashion sometime around the French Revolution, which provided several strong arguments for changing the subject. Meanwhile, your valet is still working. He has been working for some time. He adjusts the angle of a single curl above your left ear with the focused expression of a man diffusing something. You hold still. The tortoiseshell comb passes through one final time. He steps back. He looks at you the way a sculptor looks at a finished piece. Not with pride, exactly, but with the professional satisfaction of a problem correctly solved. You look effortless. It took 3 products, 1 specialist, and the better part of an hour. Nobody will mention this at breakfast. You need to tie your cravat, and this sentence sounds simpler than it is. The cravat is a length of starched white linen, approximately 4 feet long, and tying it correctly, at the precise angle, with the correct number of folds, achieving the architectural rigidity that this particular fashion moment demands, is a task that has undone better-dressed men on worse mornings. Your valet stands ready. Several previous attempts are already crumpled on the dressing table like a small linen graveyard of ambition. Each failed attempt is removed without comment. This is what valets are paid for. Let's talk about the options. There are name styles. The waterfall, the orientale, the mathematical, the tronde d'amour, which sounds romantic and requires approximately 20 minutes of focused structural engineering to achieve. Each style has its own geometry, specific folds, specific knot placement, a specific degree of chin tilt required to present it correctly. There are men in London who have published pamphlets on this subject. The pamphlets are taken seriously. You own 2 of them. Now your valet begins again. He drapes the linen around your collar, smooths it flat, and begins folding with the focused expression of a man diffusing something. Your job at this point is to hold very still, maintain a slight upward angle with your jaw, and not swallow aggressively. The starch means the fabric has opinions. It does not bend willingly. It does not forgive improvisation. It does, however, accept defeat from a skilled valet, which is the closest thing to cooperation it offers. Of course, the collar itself must also be considered. Your shirt collar points have been starched to a rigidity that keeps your head at a socially acceptable elevation, whether you want it there or not. Turning to look at something to your left is a negotiation. Looking down is inadvisable. You have arranged your morning accordingly. This is, in modern terms, a neck brace with opinions about your social calendar. This is where the mirror becomes both an ally and a problem. You can see the cravat taking shape. You can also see the 4 previous attempts drying on the table behind you, silently declining to be discussed. The current attempt is holding. The fold is clean. The angle is mathematically improbable and socially mandatory. Your valet steps back. There is a brief pause in which both of you assess the situation. Nobody speaks. The cravat is declared acceptable, and yet the process is not finished, because the cravat is only one component. There is also the waistcoat, buttoned correctly and in sequence, which sounds obvious until you are doing it under time pressure while someone watches. There is the morning coat, which fits so precisely through the shoulders that putting it on requires a specific shrugging motion your valet guides you through, as though choreographing something. The boots, already gleaming from the boot boy's 40-minute session earlier this morning, are eased on with a boot hook, because they too have been made to fit at a dimension that does not accommodate casual entry. Basically, skinny jeans but for your feet, and with more ceremony. Meanwhile, the hat. The hat must be angled, not placed. Angled. There is a correct angle and several incorrect ones, and the difference between them is approximately the width of a thumb, and everyone at the morning stroll will know which one you are wearing. Your valet adjusts it twice. You adjust it once more. After he turns away, he notices. He says nothing. Huff. He is very good at his job. The finished result is a man who appears to have dressed with effortless authority in perhaps 15 minutes. The actual time was closer to an hour, required 2 people, consumed 6 lengths of linen, and involved at least one moment where you considered staying indoors entirely, which is basically a getting ready routine with a body count. You look extremely put together. The cravat holds its angle without visible effort. You descend toward breakfast. You do not get dressed alone. And you are reminded of this every morning when your lady's maid arrives with the first layer of what will be several. There is the chemise, then the stays, then the petticoat, then the gown, each piece fitted, fastened, adjusted and smoothed before the next one is introduced. Your lady's maid circles you with the focused efficiency of someone running a very personal logistics operation. You stand in the centre and try not to be in the way, which is effectively your contribution to the process. Let's talk about the stays. They are not a corset in the fully weaponized Victorian sense, but they are structured, boned, and laced from behind, which means you cannot do them yourself under any circumstances. Your lady's maid draws the laces with the calm, systematic pull of someone who has done this several thousand times. The goal is a smooth, supported silhouette. Not suffocation, technically, but the distinction feels academic at the moment of the first tightening. If you've ever tried to wear a formal dress that was not quite your size and decided to commit anyway, this is that, but also your entire wardrobe. Now the gown. This is not simply a dress. It is a garment selected the night before, pressed that morning, and carried into the room as if it were evidence at a trial. The fabric is likely muslin, possibly silk, and it has opinions about being handled carelessly. Your lady's maid eases it over your head with the reverence of someone delivering a document to a head of state. Buttons at the back are fastened one at a time. Each one is small. There are many of them. Of course, this is also the moment for your hair. It has already been brushed, the boar bristle kind, which addresses tangles the way a formal complaint addresses a problem, but now it must be arranged. Pins are located, deployed, and occasionally lost in transit. A curl that was there a moment ago is now somewhere else. Your lady's maid does not comment on this. She simply finds it and returns it to where it belongs, which is the professional response and also the correct one. The gloves go on last, or nearly last. They are long enough to suggest that your arms cannot be trusted to appear in public unescorted. Pulling them on requires patience and a specific rolling motion because they are kid leather, and kid leather does not negotiate. Then the bonnet. Ribbons tied beneath the chin at an angle that took your lady's maid approximately 4 attempts, and still satisfies neither of you entirely. Then the parasol, which leans against the chair at a slight angle and has been waiting there since it was placed there last night, ready, as always, before you are. The whole process takes somewhere between 40 minutes and an hour, depending on the hair and the number of buttons, and whether the muslin decided this morning to cooperate. The result is that you look composed, polished, and entirely unruffled. Your lady's maid looks exactly the same as when she arrived, because efficiency is its own form of dignity. You have not yet left the room. Someone has brushed, laced, pinned, buttoned, and tied you into your day, and she is already straightening the chair where your parasol was. You are going for a walk. You are not, however, simply going for a walk. The morning stroll in Regency England is a structured social performance with an audience, a route, and an unspoken rule book that took years to absorb and can be violated in under 30 seconds. You must be seen on the correct path at the correct hour in the correct ensemble. The pace is regulated by invisible consensus. Too fast suggests anxiety. Too slow suggests indifference. The precise middle is composure, which looks identical to mild boredom, and may, in fact, be the same thing. Let's talk about the route. There is only one acceptable path through the grounds for this hour, and everyone on it already knows where you are going before you get there. The gravel is freshly raked. The hedges are trimmed to a standard that suggests they were briefed in advance. 2 footmen have been positioned near the garden's outer bend, not to assist you, but to witness you, which is, functionally, the same thing they would be doing if you had a follow account. Now, the parasol. You have been carrying it since segment 5 was assembled onto your person, and here it earns its keep. It is not deployed primarily against the sun. The sun is almost incidental. The parasol is a precision social instrument, tilted outward to signal openness, angled inward to signal that the conversation approaching you from the left is not welcome, and held at a neutral vertical when you have not yet decided. You tilt it slightly left. The neighbour approaching from the east adjusts her route accordingly. No words are exchanged. This is considered a successful interaction. Basically, it's leaving someone on red. Of course, there is also the matter of the peacock. Your household keeps at least one, because you are serious people. It roams the south lawn with the energy of something that knows it is being evaluated. A groundsman has been stationed nearby with a small supply of raisins, because peacocks do not display their feathers on a schedule that respects social timing. They require negotiation. The raisins are the negotiation. When a neighbour passes the garden gate at the correct moment, the groundsman produces the raisins, the peacock fans its tail, and everyone pretends this happened naturally. This is called having grounds. It is also called a small bribe paid to a bird every morning before breakfast has fully settled. Meanwhile, the stroll itself is generating data. Who nodded first? Who looked away? Who wore last season's ribbon on their bonnet and appeared to know it? Whose husband was not present and offered no explanation by way of his wife's expression? All of this is noted, stored, and will be circulated at the tea table before the afternoon is out, transformed by then into something slightly more interesting than what actually happened, which is just posting about it later. You smile at Mrs. Fellows from across the path. She smiles back. By 3 o'clock, this exchange will have implications. This is where the parasol angle becomes critical again. You have been carrying it at neutral for the last 40 paces, which reads as approachable but non-committal, which is exactly where you want to be until you have a better sense of who else is on the path today. You spot a woman 3 households up, whose bonnet ribbons are newer than yours. You adjust your parasol 2 degrees. She does not notice. You notice that she does not notice. The gravel crunches very evenly underfoot. The stroll lasts between 30 and 50 minutes. At its conclusion, You return to the house having covered perhaps half a mile of actual ground. The footmen resume their other duties. The peacock is given its remaining raisins. You hand your parasol to the housemaid at the door and make a small mental note about the bonnet ribbons, which you will not forget. You own peacocks. This was either your father's idea or your own after attending someone else's garden party and making a decision you cannot undo. The problem with peacocks as status symbols is that they are spectacular on their own schedule, which rarely coincides with the schedule of the guests you need to impress. Your head gardener, through what must have been remarkable trial and error, arrived at a solution. Raisins. You bribe the peacocks with raisins to fan their feathers at the correct moment. This is the system. It works roughly 60% of the time. The other 40% is a management problem. A peacock that has already eaten its raisins will not perform again, regardless of how many guests are still walking the path. It simply stands there, folded, looking at you with the expression of someone who has already been paid and considers the conversation finished. You have, technically, been outmaneuvered by a bird. This happens more often than you tell people. Now, the raisin budget is a line item, not a large one, but a real one, which means somewhere in the household accounts there is a column marked, essentially, bird motivation. Your steward records it without comment. This is one of the quieter indignities of estate management. The moment you realize that maintaining social prestige requires the ongoing financial cooperation of an animal that does not understand prestige and cannot be reasoned with. Of course, the peacocks are only the beginning. Let's talk about the broader category of ornamental animals, because in Regency England the peacock is simply the most visible entry in a much longer list. Your neighbours have deer in a decorative park. Someone 2 estates over acquired a pair of black swans, which is either very sophisticated or a threat, depending on how you read it. One family keeps a tame monkey that attends afternoon calls in a small velvet jacket. The monkey reportedly bit a baronet last spring. The family describes this as a misunderstanding. This is where the arms race becomes expensive. Each new ornamental animal raises the stakes for everyone nearby. The peacock was once sufficient. Now it is merely expected. You are already aware of a rumour that someone in the next county is importing a cassowary, which is an 8-foot flightless bird from New Guinea with a reputation for disemboweling things it finds irritating. This is either an excellent status symbol or the worst idea in the history of garden parties. Probably both. Meanwhile, your peacocks have developed opinions about the garden path. They prefer the eastern section near the hedgerow in the morning and will not be relocated without a negotiation that involves more raisins and a 15-minute delay. Guests rounding the western corner find nothing. Guests who wait by the fountain find everything. You have not yet figured out how to route people without it appearing that you are routing people, which is the actual logistical challenge of your morning. Your head gardener has adapted. He now positions himself casually near the eastern hedge at the correct hour, raisins in his coat pocket, watching the path for approaching guests with the focused attention of someone running a very small and very undignified intelligence operation. When a group rounds the corner at sufficient distance, he produces the raisins. The peacocks perform. The guests gasp, saying, everyone pretends this was nature. It was not nature. It was 40 minutes of advanced preparation, a pocket full of dried fruit, and a gardener who deserves considerably more than his annual wage. He does not receive it. He does receive a nod of acknowledgement when the display goes particularly well, which in this household counts as a standing ovation. You sit down to breakfast at 10, and everyone is already at the table, which is the first problem. Family members who spent the previous 12 hours in separate rooms of a house large enough to avoid one another entirely are now required to sit together, eat together, and produce conversation civil enough not to constitute a formal incident. There are rules. You do not discuss estate finances at breakfast. You do not raise the subject of anyone's marriage before noon. You do not mention the debt. You mention the weather, you compliment the toast, and you read everyone's mood in the first 4 minutes. The table is set with enough silverware to confuse a professional caterer. There is a rack of toast, a dish of cold meats, a pot of tea, a pot of coffee, a pot of chocolate, and a covered dish containing something egg-based that nobody has ordered and nobody will refuse. The footman stands near the sideboard at an angle that communicates total invisibility. He has heard everything that has ever been said at this table. He will continue to hear everything. You done to hear everything? He gives no indication of this. Let's talk about your mother. She is seated at her end of the table with the posture of someone who has not relaxed a single vertebra since 1794. She has opinions about the toast. She does not state them. She states them by the way she sets the toast down, which is a technique she has refined over decades into something approaching an art form. Your father is reading the Morning Post and has been reading the same paragraph for 6 minutes, which means he is not reading it at all. He is using it as a portable wall, which is basically having a phone at the dinner table. Now, the conversation begins. Someone mentions the weather. Someone agrees about the weather. Someone extends this into an observation about the roads, which briefly threatens to become a comment about the Northfield drainage project, which is dangerously adjacent to estate finances and is shut down with a redirect to the neighbour's new carriage. The neighbour's new carriage is safe territory. You establish that it is very fine. You establish that it was perhaps bought rather quickly. You leave the word quickly in the centre of the table and watch everyone carefully, not look at it. This is where the real work happens. Regency breakfast conversation operates like a game where the objective is to deliver information without appearing to deliver it, to ask questions without appearing to ask them, and to draw conclusions loudly enough for everyone to hear while maintaining total plausible deniability. Your aunt mentions that she saw Miss Hartwell at the milliner's on Thursday, twice. She says this the way a chess player puts down a piece. She is not finished. Of course, the food continues regardless. You eat a piece of toast. You pour tea from a pot that a housemaid carried upstairs 20 minutes ago, which means it is now operating at the temperature of mild disappointment. The egg dish arrives in front of you via the footman, who deploys it with the precision of someone who has been trained never to appear to be doing anything at all. Nobody thanks him. This is not considered rude. This is considered correct. Meanwhile, your younger brother has said 4 words and eaten enough cold meat to concern a physician, which is not something you will raise at the table because a physician's opinion at breakfast falls under the same prohibition as estate finances. It makes things real in a way that ruins the eggs. He is fine. He is almost certainly fine. You compliment the toast. The breakfast lasts 40 minutes. In that time, no one mentions the debt, no one raises the subject of anyone's marriage, and the neighbour's carriage is discussed from 3 separate angles. Your aunt's comment about Miss Hartwell at the milliner's has by the end of the meal been elaborated into a full narrative that no one explicitly constructed and everyone fully understands. Nobody said anything. Everything was said. The footman refills the teapot and does not blink. You have a steward, and the steward handles the money. This is not an administrative arrangement. It is a philosophy. The wealthy in Regency England have arrived at a collective understanding that direct contact with money, tracking it, counting it, knowing precisely where it goes, is beneath them, and the steward exists to manage that reality on your behalf. When expenses arise, you communicate them through the appropriate channel. When a state income arrives, the steward receives it. You receive a summary document, which you may or may not read, and whose numbers, if accurate, are essentially ceremonial. Let's talk about what your household actually costs. There are London gowns, which are priced in a way that suggests the fabric was woven by hand from a rare cloud. There are Parisian boots, because English leather apparently lacks the correct cultural attitude. There is new wallpaper, because last season's wallpaper has opinions you no longer share. There are candles, an enormous quantity of candles, and seasonal lace curtains, and a standing account at a milliner that has not been reconciled since the previous quarter, and probably not the one before that. The steward has all of this. You have the curtains. Now, your allowance is large. You know it is large in the same way you know the house has a roof, not because you have measured it, but because problems would arise if it did not exist. Specific numbers are not discussed. Specific numbers are, frankly, a little vulgar. What you receive is a general sense of sufficiency, communicated in the form of continued access to the things you already have, which has been working reasonably well for several years, and is not a system you plan to question. This is where the gambling complicates things. Debt is not shameful in Regency high society. Debt is, in many circles, a form of social participation. IOUs circulate at card tables with the casual confidence of business cards. Creditors send polite notes on good paper, and the notes are set aside in a drawer, and the drawer is in a room that is rarely entered, and this constitutes a response, which is basically leaving bills unread. Your steward is aware of the drawer. He has sent his own polite note about the drawer. That note is also in the drawer. Of course, money does eventually require management. The estate generates income, rents from tenants, yields from land, various sums arriving by arrangement. The steward tracks all of it, reconciles the accounts, negotiates with creditors when negotiation can no longer be deferred, and produces quarterly reports in careful handwriting that demonstrate a complete grasp of a financial situation you have successfully avoided understanding for your entire adult life. He has done this job for 11 years. He has the posture of a man who has learned not to express emotion about ledgers, and yet the system functions. Debts are eventually settled, in roughly the order that creditors become persistent enough to require it. The household continues to operate. The Parisian boots arrive. The wallpaper is replaced. Somewhere in the accounts, all of this makes sense, because the steward has made it make sense, which is essentially the same as it being fine, or, as we'd call it, someone else's budgeting app doing the work. Meanwhile, you are at breakfast, and the aunt mentions that the Ashford estate has taken on a new steward after the last one quietly resigned. Nobody comments on this. The footman refills the coffee. The numbers in the quarterly report, sitting unopened on the writing desk upstairs, remain ceremonial. You have letters from your creditors, and you have developed a system for managing them. The system is that you do not open them. This is not negligence. It is a recognized social practice. Debt in Regency England is not a shameful secret, but a condition, like the weather, universally acknowledged and perpetually unaddressed. Your creditors write in a tone of polished patience, carefully avoiding anything as vulgar as urgency. Their letters accumulate on the side table in the order of arrival. Occasionally, one is moved to a different pile. This constitutes action. Let's talk about the letters themselves, because they are genuinely impressive pieces of correspondence. Your tailor has written to remind you, with great gentleness, that the sum outstanding for 6 waistcoats, 2 morning coats, and 1 particularly ambitious evening ensemble remains, as yet, unsettled. He hopes you are in good health. He mentions, almost apologetically, that this represents the 14th month of the arrangement. He signs it, your most devoted servant. He is not your servant. He is a man who has not been paid in over a year, and has simply decided to phrase this as warmly as possible. This is, essentially, a collections notice written by someone who attended finishing school. Your bootmaker's letter is shorter. Your glover's letter is shorter still. Shorter still, your wine merchant, who is owed the most, writes the longest letters and receives the least acknowledgement, which may be why he keeps writing, on the theory that volume will eventually produce results. It has not produced results. It has produced a very thick stack on the left side of the table. Now, moving a letter from one pile to another is not nothing. It signals awareness. It implies intention. It suggests that at some future, unspecified moment, the letter may be opened, read, and potentially discussed with the steward, who will then do something fiscal and competent, and the whole arrangement will resolve itself through a process you have never needed to fully understand. This is, functionally, how your finances work. The steward handles the specifics. You handle the piles. Of course, some debts are more social in nature and require a different kind of management entirely. The IOU from last Tuesday's card game circulates among 3 households before arriving back on your table, slightly crumpled, smelling faintly of port. You do not recall writing it. You almost certainly wrote it. The amount is significant enough to be interesting, and not significant enough to be alarming, which places it comfortably in the category of things you will address in the autumn. It is spring. This is where the system reveals its one genuine flaw. Creditors occasionally appear in person, not to make a scene, that would be grotesque, but to attend the same dinner party, the same assembly, the same Tuesday morning at the lending library. Your tailor, specifically, has a cousin who moves in acceptable circles. You have encountered him twice this month. The encounters are cordial. Nobody mentions the waistcoats. You each nod with the focused goodwill of 2 people silently agreeing to discuss something at a time that will never arrive. This is, in modern terms, leaving someone on read and then liking their Instagram post. And yet there is a letter this morning that sits slightly apart from the others. It is from your solicitor. It is sealed with red wax and written on heavier paper than usual, which means it contains information. Actual, specific, numerical information. You push it gently beneath the tailor's 14th letter. The steward will be in on Thursday. Thursday is soon enough. The letter does not move on its own, but it has a quality about it, a kind of weight that suggests it is aware of being ignored. You pour another cup of tea. The letter remains. Where you put it. Someone will deal with it eventually, and that someone will almost certainly not be you. You are managing the social demands of your day above stairs, and below them, an entirely parallel social world is operating. The servant hierarchy is not informal. It has ranks, precedents, and rules about who sits where at the servants' table that are enforced with a seriousness that rivals your own dining room. The butler at the head, the housekeeper at the foot, the lady's maid seated above the housemaid. These distinctions are understood, respected, and occasionally contested with the same energy you bring to a disputed seating arrangement at a county dinner. They are running their own version of this. Let's talk about the butler. He holds authority over the mail staff, the wine cellar, and the silverware, all 3 of which he treats as personal responsibilities requiring constant vigilance. His keys hang from his belt and announce his presence from the far end of any corridor, which is less a design flaw and more a management philosophy. Nothing happens in this house without him knowing. Nothing is poured, unlocked, or admitted through the front door without his involvement. He has been in this household for 11 years and carries himself accordingly. The housekeeper occupies the same level of authority on the female side. She manages the linen, the cleaning schedules, the housemaids, and the keys to a different set of locked rooms. She and the butler maintain a working relationship that functions precisely like 2 neighbouring countries who signed a treaty decades ago and have not technically been at war since. There is cooperation. There is also territory. The boundary between them is understood by everyone in the building except the family, who has never thought to ask. Now, the housemaids. They are up before you are. They were up before you were even considering being up. While you were still horizontal and a servant was carefully opening the curtains, another servant was downstairs blackening the grates, carrying coal and hauling water through hallways you have never visited. The work begins somewhere around 5 in the morning and does not conclude at a time anyone would call reasonable. This is not described as a hardship. It is described as a position. Your servants know everything. They know that the second housemaid found a note tucked inside a glove left in the blue drawing room. They know that the cook has been watering the cream. K. They know that the master came in at 2 in the morning and required cold water and silence. None of this travels upstairs in the form of direct disclosure. It travels laterally, in the kitchen, at the servants' table, between the footman and the lady's maid while the tea is steeping. Your household is, functionally, a minor intelligence operation, and you are not cleared for most of it. Of course, you retain privacy in the technical sense. Someone is always present for your dressing, your washing, your correspondence arrangements, and occasionally your arguments. Your lady's maid has helped you into your clothes, handled your personal correspondence, and held your smelling salts through 4 separate crises this quarter alone. She knows your measurements, your moods, your preferred excuses, and which of your headaches are anatomical and which are social. She does not mention this. You do not mention that she knows. This is the arrangement. Meanwhile, below stairs, dinner at the servants' table is a formal occasion. The senior staff eat in the housekeeper's room. The junior staff eat at the long table in the hall. The food is plain, but the precedence is not. Who serves whom? Who pours first? Who speaks to the butler directly? And who routes requests through the footman? All of it is observed. Someone made a remark last Tuesday about the placement of a salt cellar that has not been fully resolved. It remains under consideration. You employ the butler, and the butler runs the house. These two facts have a complicated relationship with the daily reality, which is that nothing significant happens without his knowledge, and most things happen because he organized them. His keys hang from his belt and produce a specific jangle that carries clearly across the ground floor, a sound every servant in the building has learned to recognize as the administrative heartbeat of the household. He controls the wine cellar, the good silver, and the daily schedule that governs everyone beneath him. You are, in a practical sense, a very well-housed tenant. Let's talk about the wine cellar. It is locked. You do not have the key. If you would like wine at dinner, and you will, because dinner lasts 3 hours, and wine is the only thing making that possible, you make a request, and the butler fulfills it at the appropriate time, in the appropriate quantity, decanted in advance according to standards you did not set and would not know how to verify. The bottles are catalogued. The butler knows exactly how many there are. You have only a vague awareness that wine comes from somewhere downstairs. Now, the silver. The good silver lives in a lock chest, wrapped in chamois cloth, and is produced only on occasions the butler has already determined to be worthy. The household silver has not been touched by your hands in months, possibly longer. It reappears at dinner parties, polished to a standard that makes your own reflections slightly accusatory. The footmen who carry it walk with the careful posture of people transporting something that matters more than they do. This is where the authority becomes architectural. The butler does not merely organize, he sequences. He decides what time breakfast is laid. He decides when the candles in the drawing room require replacing. He decides which creditor's note goes on top of the hall tray and which one migrates gradually toward the bottom. This last function is not in his official job description. It happens anyway. You have never discussed it. You are both grateful for this arrangement. Of course, the butler also knows things. Not abstractly, specifically. He knows that your eldest son came in after 2 in the morning on Thursday with mud on his coat and nothing plausible to say about it. He knows that a letter arrived Tuesday, addressed in a hand that caused the housekeeper to raise one eyebrow exactly 2 millimeters before setting it on the tray. He knows the current state of the cellar relative to the planned entertainment schedule, the approximate mood of the cook, and the precise social weight of every visitor who has crossed the threshold in the last 6 months. This is not gossip. It is operational intelligence, and it is the reason the household functions at all. Meanwhile, your actual role in the daily management of the house is closer to a ceremonial position. You approve menus when asked, which is approximately twice a week. You occasionally comment on a floral arrangement. You once suggested rearranging the breakfast room, and a very polite conversation followed, after which nothing moved. The butler has been here longer than the wallpaper. The wallpaper at least gets replaced every few years, and yet the arrangement is not without its dignity. He addresses you with perfect formal deference. Every request is met with a slight incline of the head. If he has an opinion about your guests, your choices, or the rate at which you are working through the 1809 Bordeaux, it does not appear on his face. This is professionalism of a very high order, which is to say, it is extremely expensive acting, and you are paying for every performance. It is, in modern terms, a 5-star Yelp review that he writes fresh every single morning. The keys jangle faintly somewhere down the hall. Dinner will be ready at 7. The silver is already gleaming. You technically own the kitchen. The cook, however, operates under a different understanding of jurisdiction, and she has been here longer than some of the furniture. She produces 3 meals a day for a household of 20 or more people, manages her own staff of kitchen maids and scullery workers, and maintains a provisions inventory that would impress anyone. When you have a preference about the menu, it travels through intermediaries before reaching her. The response, when it comes, is compliance. The undertone communicates a separate opinion clearly. Let's talk about the scale of the operation. Breakfast alone requires eggs, cold meats, bread, preserved fruit, tea, coffee, chocolate, and at least 2 things made with butter. Dinner is a separate project involving multiple removes, each with its own sauce, garnish, and serving temperature, managed across a kitchen with no thermometer and a fire that the cook reads like a personal language. She knows when the oven runs hot. She knows when the scullery maid has been crying. Both problems get managed in the same tone. Now, the kitchen itself has opinions. The largest pot has been seasoned by decades of use and does not require instruction. The pastry board has a preferred orientation that is not negotiable. The copper pans hang in a specific order, and anyone who rehung them incorrectly was corrected once and never made the same mistake again. The kitchen is not a room you walk through. It is a country with a border and a head of state. Of course, provisions must be sourced, which means the cook also maintains relationships with the butcher, the fishmonger, the dairy supplier, and at least one man who arrives twice a week with a cart, and no fixed prices. She negotiates. She remembers what she paid last month. She has, on record somewhere in her memory, every short wait and substitution attempted in the past several years. The household steward manages your finances. The cook manages the actual cost of feeding you, which is a different and considerably more complex number. This is where the kitchen hierarchy asserts itself. Below the cook, the kitchen maids who do the washing, the hauling, the peeling, and the earliest morning fire starting. Below them, the scullery workers who handle whatever is left, which is considerable. Everyone has a task. Everyone knows the order. A kitchen maid who reaches above her station gets a look that functions as a full paragraph of correction. The scullery girl who dropped an entire tureen of soup last February has not been forgiven, technically, though she is still employed, which is its own complicated message. Meanwhile, you may occasionally wander toward the kitchen stairs with a notion about dinner. This is not advisable. The butler will intercept you before the second step, not rudely, efficiently. There will be a gentle rerouting involving a question about your afternoon schedule, and you will find yourself back in the drawing room holding a cup of tea you did not request, having achieved nothing. This happens to everyone. It has happened to your father. It happened to a visiting earl last autumn, who wanted to personally request a particular pudding, and was redirected so smoothly he only realized it 3 days later, which is basically leaving a note on the break room fridge and getting a calendar invite instead. And yet, the food arrives, on time, at temperature, in sequence, presented correctly, and in quantities sufficient for a household that eats with the sustained commitment of people who have nothing else scheduled. The cook does not ask for praise. She receives it occasionally in the form of a compliment passed down through the housekeeper, which travels back up the chain slightly improved in transit. She files this information and returns to the next meal. This is, in modern terms, a 5-star review she will never read. The kitchen door swings. Something inside smells extraordinary. You were not involved. You are surrounded by people who know everything about you. Not most things. Everything. The valet who dressed you this morning knows the condition of your wardrobe and the state of your nerves. The housemaid who turned down your bed last night noticed the letter on the nightstand and reported the seal on it below stairs. The footman who served at breakfast observed which topics made you go quiet. None of this is malicious. It is the natural result of having people present for every moment of your day who are professionally trained to pay close attention. Let's talk about what that actually means. The lady's maid who arranges your hair every morning has, over the course of several years, catalogued every grey strand, every mood shift, every morning when you asked for the curtains left closed. She knows which bonnet you reach for when you are anxious, which one you wear when you are performing confidence, and which one has not left the wardrobe since a particular social event you have not spoken about since. She has never mentioned any of this. She simply hands you the correct one. Meanwhile, below stairs, information moves at a speed that would embarrass your fastest carriage. The butler receives it, filters it, and distributes what is useful. The footmen exchange observations at the sideboard. The kitchen maid hears everything through the dumbwaiter. By the time you have finished your second cup of tea, the entire household staff has a reasonably accurate picture of your emotional state, your finances, and at least one thing you did not intend anyone to notice. This is basically a minor intelligence agency, except it also polishes your boots. This is where the architecture of the house works against you. Grand rooms, long corridors, thick doors, and yet a servant moving quietly between them is effectively invisible by professional convention. You do not acknowledge the footman stationed at the wall during dinner. He is part of the furniture. The furniture is listening. The furniture has opinions about your table manners, and will share them later over supper downstairs. Of course, none of this information is used against you in any formal sense. The butler keeps his own counsel. The lady's maid is professionally discreet. Valet has seen things that would fill a moderately entertaining memoir, and has chosen, so far, not to write it. The operative word is so far. Servants leave households. They take new positions. They talk to other servants, who talk to other servants, who are employed by the family your daughter is hoping to marry into. Discretion is the norm. It is not a guarantee. And yet you trust them completely, because you have no alternative. You cannot dress yourself. You cannot manage the household. You cannot answer the door, carry the water, light the fire, or source the correct grade of candle without someone who knows what they are doing. Your privacy and your dependency are the same situation, looked at from different angles. You have chosen comfort, and comfort requires witnesses. What the servants know, practically speaking, the approximate size of your debts, the name on the letter you burned last Tuesday, the frequency with which you request laudanum from the medicine chest, and whether the smile you wore at breakfast was the real one. They will not tell you they know. You will not ask. Everyone moves through the day with perfect manners and a completely shared understanding that politely goes unmentioned, which is, in modern terms, having location sharing turned on for people you've never directly addressed. The housemaid folds back the evening coverlet. The candle is trimmed and set on the nightstand. Everything is exactly where it should be, which required 3 people to arrange. You have no privacy. This is not a complaint about the physical arrangement of the house. The house is enormous and contains more rooms than you regularly use. It is an observation about how the house operates. At any given moment of your day, there is a servant present or within immediate reach. Your morning was witnessed. Your breakfast was observed. Your afternoon correspondence was handled by someone else before it reached you. There is no part of your daily life that exists outside the knowledge of the household staff, who are, by the nature of their work, paying continuous attention. Let's talk about what that actually means in practice. Your valet knows which boot takes longer to get on. Your lady's maid knows which hairstyle makes you irritable and which one you request when you're expecting someone specific. The footman who carries your letters knows, from the weight and the seal, roughly who sent them and in what emotional state. None of this information is requested. None of it is volunteered. It simply accumulates Below stairs, in the collective institutional memory of a staff that has been watching you perform your life for years, which is basically having your search history read out loud at a staff meeting. This is where it gets genuinely strange. You are, by every social measure, the most powerful person in this building. You own it. You employ everyone in it. You can dismiss any of them with a short conversation and a reference letter that you may or may not make accurate. And yet you cannot sneeze without someone noting which handkerchief you used. You cannot change your mind about dinner without 4 people adjusting their afternoon accordingly. The power runs in one direction on paper and in a considerably more complicated direction in practice. Of course, this is not considered unusual. It is simply how a well-run household operates. Privacy, as a concept, belongs to people who lack the resources to have staff. You have staff, therefore you have in exchange a rotating audience for every private moment you have ever experienced indoors. This is what wealth looks like from the inside. It looks like someone folding your clothes while you are still thinking about something personal. Meanwhile, the staff maintains a professionally impeccable blankness. No one reacts. No one comments. The footman who carried in your tray this morning while you were mid-argument with a letter, he did not flinch, did not pause, set down the tray, and withdrew at exactly the appropriate pace. What he thought is not available to you. What he said about it downstairs is also not available to you, but it was almost certainly more accurate than anything you told yourself afterward. And yet, the arrangement is not without its own logic. A fully staffed household requires that everyone knows their part, which requires that everyone knows what is happening. The butler knows the schedule. The housekeeper knows the inventory. TBO. The cook knows what you ate yesterday, and what you failed to finish, and what that probably means for tonight's menu. The system runs on information, and information in a private household means information about you specifically. Now, there is one room in the house where this dynamic becomes most visible, and that is the dressing room. This is the room where you are most physically dependent on another person's assistance, and most exposed in the straightforward literal sense, and also the room where the performance of not noticing reaches its professional peak. Your lady's maid hands you each garment with the focused neutrality of someone diffusing something. She has seen you in every state a person can be in, probably seen you going cold, cheeser than two. She has opinions, she keeps them to herself, which is genuinely one of the more impressive professional disciplines of the era, or as we'd call it, extremely good at keeping the group chats separate. You do not know what she thinks. You never will. She will hand you a garment, adjust a sleeve, and look at a point slightly past your shoulder, with the expression of someone who has thought of absolutely nothing. You spend a portion of every social gathering carefully managing what is said about you, by whom and in what sequence, because information in Regency England travels faster than any horse and lands with more damage than any carriage collision. The gossip economy is not casual, it has structure. There are people who originate stories, people who amplify them, and people who arrive at a dinner party already carrying 3 versions of something involving you that you have not yet had the opportunity to deny. Your reputation is a living document that others are editing continuously. Let's talk about the ladies of the tea table. They are the principal operatives of this system, and they are very good at their jobs. A single raised eyebrow over a teacup can dispatch a rumour across 3 counties by Thursday. The genius of the operation is that nothing is ever said directly. It is implied, suggested, gently wondered about, and then left hanging in the air like smoke while the speaker refills her cup and looks elsewhere. By the time the story reaches you, it has acquired detail, motive, and at least one plausible witness. Now, the triggering events are rarely large. A misplaced glance across a ballroom, a second visit to the cheese table, arriving at a garden party in a bonnet that someone's aunt wore to a funeral 3 seasons ago. These are not mistakes, these are evidence. A social reader of Regency England can construct an entire narrative of romantic disaster or financial ruin from the fact that you wore the same gloves twice. You did not know gloves had a frequency limit. They do. Of course, you participate in this system too. Everyone does. You pass along what you've heard because silence is its own kind of statement, and a person who never contributes to the information supply is regarded with deep suspicion. So, you mention the thing you heard about the Ashworths, not maliciously, you clarify, just as a matter of concern, and watch it become someone else's contribution by the end of the room. This is how it works. Nobody is innocent. Nobody pretends to be. This is where the threat of Bath becomes relevant. Bath is lovely. Bath has excellent water and pleasant architecture, and a very active social scene. Bath is also where you are sent, when your reputation has sustained damage that London air cannot repair. A quiet season in Bath is code for something happened and we are all giving it time to become a story about someone else, which is basically getting ratioed and logging off for a few weeks. You do not want to winter in Bath. You want to be the person who knows why someone else is in Bath. Meanwhile, the servants have heard everything. They heard the original version, the corrected version, and the version that your hostess told her lady's maid who told the parlour maid, who mentioned it while collecting the tea things. The below-stairs intelligence network runs parallel to the above-stairs one and is, by most operational measures, faster. A footman standing at his station during dinner absorbs more useful information per hour than most government ministers, or as we'd call it, having notifications on for everyone in the room. He does not comment. He refills the wine. And yet the strangest part is how much effort goes into managing a reputation that you cannot directly control, in a system you cannot audit, according to rules that are never written down. You cannot file a complaint. You cannot request a correction. You can only show up next week in a better bonnet, greet everyone warmly, and hope the Ashworths have done something more interesting in the intervening days. Usually they have. You are at tea, and this looks like a social gathering. It is not only that. The women assembled around this table are running a small intelligence operation, gathering, verifying and distributing information about every household in the county with an efficiency that would be impressive in any professional context. You say something. You watch it pass around the table through responses that are neutral, interested, and entirely non-committal. By tomorrow morning, what you said will have been stripped of context, reassembled into something marginally more interesting, and delivered to 6 other drawing rooms as established fact. Basically, you just posted. Let's talk about the mechanics. Nobody accuses. Nobody gossips in any recognizable sense of the word. What happens instead is a series of observations delivered in a tone of mild, caring concern. Mrs. Hartley is said to have been looking rather tired lately. Miss Fenwick's new bonnet is remarked upon with an expression of genuine neutrality that contains multitudes. The phrase, "one does hear things," is deployed with the precision of a surgical instrument. Nobody is attacked. The table simply processes information, and you leave somehow knowing things you didn't know when you arrived. Now, the seating arrangement is not accidental. You are placed where you are placed for a reason, which nobody will explain. The woman directly across from you has been here longer than everyone else, and has refilled her cup twice without touching the biscuits. She is listening. The woman to your left is talking cheerfully about the weather, which means she is not the one you need to worry about. The one to your right said almost nothing, and is therefore the most dangerous person at the table. This is not paranoia. This is pattern recognition developed over 3 full seasons of attendance. Of course, the tea itself is not incidental. The quality of the leaves, the weight of the cups, the temperature of the water, all of it is observed and filed away. Serving inferior tea is a social statement. Serving exceptional tea is also a social statement. Serving tea in cups that are subtly newer than last month's cups is a statement about recent expenditure that everyone notices and nobody mentions, which is the equivalent of leaving the price tag on. The teapot has been in this room longer than some of the marriages represented at the table, and it is absolutely not neutral. This is where reputation actually lives, not in the ballrooms or the morning strolls, but here, in a warm room, over cups of something that costs more per ounce than most of England earns in a week, a misplaced comment about someone's husband's business dealings will be around the county before the crumpets are finished. A slightly too long pause before answering a question will be discussed for a fortnight. You can survive a bad hem. You cannot survive implying, even accidentally, that the Ashworth family's shooting party was anything less than entirely successful. And yet, you will be back next week. You will sit in approximately the same chair. You will offer approximately the same observations about the weather, the gardens, the very small piece of county news you feel comfortable releasing into circulation. You will watch the information flow around the table and contribute just enough to remain relevant. One of the women will lean slightly forward when you speak. That is the closest thing to a compliment you will receive all afternoon. You have made a mistake. It may have been a glance that lasted one beat too long, a second visit to the supper table that was noticed and interpreted, or an absence from an evening that someone has decided to find significant. The exact nature of the mistake barely matters. What matters is that it has been observed, assessed, and is now in active circulation. You have approximately 1 or 2 public appearances to correct the narrative before it becomes the narrative. The tools available to you are posture, strategic association, a consistent story, and the ability to seem entirely unconcerned. Let's talk about posture first. You cannot arrive at your next appearance looking troubled, because looking troubled confirms the rumour regardless of what the rumour is. You enter the room at a measured pace. Not slow, not hurried, with your chin at a precisely calibrated angle that communicates serenity without appearing to try. It requires the same concentration as defusing a mechanism you have never seen before, and it must look effortless. Nobody teaches you this directly. You absorb it by watching everyone else do it, and understanding that the moment you stop, you are finished. Now, strategic association. You need to be seen in proximity to people whose reputations are unimpeachable, or at least less impeachable than yours at the moment. A brief conversation with Lady Somebody Respectable in a visible location does more work than a formal denial ever could. You are not asking for her endorsement. You are borrowing the general atmosphere of her standing for approximately 8 minutes, while other people watch from across the room. She may or may not know this is happening. It does not matter. How it looks is the entire product. Of course, you also need a story, not a defense. A story. Defenses imply guilt. A story simply occupies the space where the rumour was trying to live. You were unwell that evening, or you were attending to a family matter, or you had a prior engagement that you mention once and do not elaborate on. The lack of elaboration is important. People elaborate when they are lying, and everyone knows this, which means a single clean sentence delivered without follow-up reads as the obvious truth. You practice this sentence before you leave the house. Your lady's maid has heard you say it 3 times already and has the good sense to look at the ceiling. Meanwhile, the people who started the circulation are also in the room. They are not smirking. They are not watching you visibly. They are engaged in what appears to be an entirely separate conversation about someone else, possibly about a hat, and they have the same pleasant and open expression they always have. One of them catches your eye and smiles warmly. Holwill? This is not reassuring. This is information. Warmth at this stage means the story is still in early distribution and they are curious how you will handle it. You smile back with exactly the same warmth. You both understand what is happening. Neither of you will ever mention it directly, and yet the real danger is not the people who started it. It is the 3rd and 4th recipients, who received a partial version of the original observation and have now filled in the gaps using whatever they find most interesting. By the time a piece of social information reaches its 5th carrier, it has acquired details that did not exist in the original incident. Someone has added a location. Someone has added a name. You are now managing not the thing that happened, but the thing that people have decided happened, which is a different and significantly larger project. The window for correction is short, roughly 2 appearances, as noted. After that, The story has enough circulation that disputing it starts to look like protest, which is its own kind of confirmation. You have one shot to make your revised version boring enough that people lose interest, and interesting enough that they adopt it as the accepted account. This is, frankly, a more demanding skill than anything you were formally educated in. Nobody put it in a curriculum. It is just what Tuesday looks like sometimes. The road to Bath. You have received a suggestion, delivered with perfect sincerity and impeccable manners, that perhaps a season at Bath would do you good. This is not a vacation recommendation. Bath in 1812 is where reputations go to recover, that is to say, where people who have done social damage are sent until the county moves on to someone else's. The pump rooms, the assembly rooms, the mineral waters, these are the infrastructure of recovery. You drink the water, attend the dances, converse politely with others who are also pretending to be there voluntarily, and wait. Let's talk about what Bath actually is. It is a Georgian city built on hot springs, which the Romans discovered and the English subsequently claimed credit for, and it has been receiving the socially inconvenient for long enough that it has developed its own ecosystem. The assembly rooms run dances 3 times a week. The pump room serves mineral water at a temperature and flavour that suggests the earth itself is trying to discourage you from continuing. Yep. You are expected to drink it anyway, because the water is medicinal and your recovery requires commitment to the performance. Now, the mineral water contains iron, calcium, and something your body registers as a complaint. Doctors recommend it for gout, nerves, melancholy, and what they diplomatically call constitutional weakness, which covers everything from genuine illness to having publicly disagreed with someone's mother. 2 glasses per morning, taken standing, while making conversation. The water does not taste good. Nobody says this. Bath has an institutional position on the mineral water, and the institutional position is that it is curative, and you will be drinking it. The other residents of Bath at any given moment include the genuinely unwell, the fashionably convalescent, the definitively exiled, and a considerable number of people who came for a fortnight 3 years ago and simply did not leave. You will be introduced to several of them. They will ask about your family with the careful enthusiasm of people collecting information they plan to use later. You will answer briefly and return the question. This is called conversation. It is also called intelligence gathering, and everyone in the room is doing it simultaneously. Of course, Bath has its own social hierarchy, which operates on slightly different rules than London's. Reputation damage that would be catastrophic in the county can be quietly recalibrated here, provided you attend correctly, dress correctly, and do not revisit the original incident in any form. The master of ceremonies at the assembly rooms, an actual appointed official whose entire job is managing the social traffic of dances and introductions, can smooth an entrance or quietly redirect a problematic one. He is, functionally, a bouncer with excellent manners and a better coat. Meanwhile, the dancing matters. Not because you particularly want to dance, but because standing at the edge of an assembly room is a statement, and the statement it makes is unfavourable. You dance, you are pleasant, you compliment the musicians, even though the musicians are having an uneven evening. You accept a second glass of mineral water when offered, because declining implies you are not committed to your own recovery, and commitment to recovery is the entire point of being here. This is where Bath becomes genuinely strange. It works. Not because the water cures anything significant, it doesn't. And not because 2 months of dances and polite conversation repairs actual social injury. You went to take the waters. You returned looking well. Whatever happened before your departure is now a prior chapter, and the current chapter is that you appear to be fine. The prior chapter has not been destroyed exactly. It has simply been filed somewhere inconvenient, and no one in this room is sufficiently motivated to go looking for it. And yet the mineral water is genuinely terrible. You finish your second glass. You smile. Across the room, someone else who has also received a very sincere suggestion is doing exactly the same thing. You are going calling, and this requires preparation. The afternoon visit in Regency England is a formal social manoeuvre governed by rules precise enough to communicate meaning through paper left on a silver tray. A card with a folded corner signals one thing. A card left face up signals another. Arriving in person when only a card was expected is a social statement. Not arriving after indicating you would is a different one. The calling card system lets you manage relationships at a distance while maintaining the appearance of warmth. This is its primary function. Let's talk about the card itself. It is small, engraved, and contains your name in a font that took someone several months to select. The quality of the paper communicates your solvency. The engraving communicates your taste. The font communicates your family's opinion of itself. You carry them in a silver card case, which communicates that you own a silver card case. The whole system is essentially a 19th century inbox, except that every message costs 3 shillings and requires a footman. Now, the folded corner. A corner folded toward you means you came in person. A corner folded away means a servant delivered it on your behalf. A card left without any fold means something else, which varies depending on which county you're in, who explained it to you, and how much they personally liked you when they explained it. There is no central authority on folded corners. There is no pamphlet. There is only the silent collective certainty of everyone in the room that you did it wrong. Of course, actually calling requires a visit. You arrive in a carriage, not because the distance demands it, but because arriving on foot suggests your horses are dead, your finances are precarious, or both. You are shown into the drawing room, where your host appears within 15 minutes if they like you, 20 if they are deciding, and not at all if the servant returns with a very apologetic expression, and the information that the family is not at home. This phrase does not mean they are absent. It means they are home and declining to receive you. Everyone knows this. No one acknowledges it. This is where the timing becomes important. A call lasts between 15 and 30 minutes. Fewer than 15 suggests you found the visit unpleasant. More than 30 suggests you did not notice the signs that it had ended. The signs include the hostess straightening items that do not need straightening, a slight increase in the frequency of her glances toward the window, and the tea going cold without being refreshed. You are expected to read these signals accurately. There is no exam. There is only the memory of everyone present. Meanwhile, the card tray in the hall is doing real work. A footman receives every card that arrives and arranges them in a sequence that reflects the order of visits. Your hostess reviews this tray the way a general reviews reconnaissance reports, noting who came, who sent a servant instead, who arrived twice in 1 week, and who has conspicuously not come at all. Absence from the tray is information. A gap of more than 10 days is a statement. A gap of 3 weeks is a verdict. And yet the stated purpose of all of this is friendship. You are, nominally, maintaining warm social ties with people you genuinely care for. Some of them you do genuinely care for. You bring them news, share minor observations, inquire after children whose names you have memorized specifically for this purpose. The conversation is pleasant. The room is warm. The tea, when it arrives, is good. The card case snaps shut in your hand on the way out. You have left 1 card for the lady of the house and 1 for her husband, which is the correct number, and you folded the corner correctly, you are almost certain. The footman closes the door behind you with exactly as much ceremony as the visit deserved. You get back into the carriage and begin composing, silently, what you will say about this visit when someone asks, you need a different outfit for dinner, not an adjusted version of your afternoon dress, a different outfit, assembled from the beginning, with different shoes, different gloves, and a standard of overall presentation that can only be achieved with your lady's maid returning for a second session. The afternoon gown goes back into the wardrobe. The evening gown comes out. It requires different underpinnings, a more ambitious hair arrangement, and jewels that have their own storage protocol and rules about which are appropriate for which occasion. You have been dressed twice today. The evening has not yet started. Farweet, Abowie ar dollars bruki, Tayan. Let's talk about the underpinnings. The evening requires a corset, laced more firmly than the afternoon corset, on the theory that dinner is a public event and public events require structural commitment. Your lady's maid positions herself behind you and pulls. The process resembles assembling flat-pack furniture with no instructions except the furniture is you and the stakes are higher. When it is finished, you can stand very straight and breathe in a technically functional way. Sitting will require some advanced planning. The gown itself is silk, which means it has pinions. It does not travel well. It does not tolerate being rushed. It must be eased over the hair arrangement rather than pulled, lowered rather than dropped, and fastened from the bottom up by someone with patience and good eyesight. Your lady's maid has both. She has also learned to communicate mostly through small disapproving sounds, which you have come to understand as a complete language. A soft exhale means the hooks are misaligned. A slightly sharper exhale means you moved when you shouldn't have. A full silence means it has gone well, and you accept this as praise. Now, the hair. The afternoon style was dressed and pinned. The evening style is dressed, pinned, coiled, threaded with ribbon, and in some cases augmented with additional hair that is not yours. This is not considered unusual. It is considered ambitious. The result involves height, symmetry, and enough hairpins to make passing through a doorway a mild structural concern. You hold very still. Your lady's maid works from the top down. The candles are lit because natural light is gone, and this operation cannot be conducted in the dark, though it would save you from seeing the intermediate stages. Of course, there are the jewels. The jewel case is brought out by your lady's maid, not by you, because it lives in a locked drawer and you do not carry the key. The pearls are for modest evenings. The garnets signal intent. The diamonds are for occasions where the room needs to know immediately who you are before you have said a single word. Tonight is a garnets occasion, which your lady's maid confirmed without being asked, because she has absorbed your social calendar through what appears to be sheer atmospheric exposure. Meanwhile, somewhere across the house, your husband is being dressed by his valet in a process that takes approximately 20 minutes and produces a result that will be described as effortless. His cravat has been tied in a configuration that requires, by informal count, 4 attempts and a small consultation. His coat fits because it was made to fit by a tailor who visited the house, measured everything, and charged accordingly. He will come downstairs looking as though he simply appeared that way. And yet the evening has its own logic. You have been dressed twice today, and you will be undressed twice tonight. And in the morning, the whole system resets. The gown goes back to the wardrobe. The jewels go back to the locked drawer. The hairpins are collected, counted, and returned to their tray. Your lady's maid knows exactly how many there are. She always has. You have been preparing for approximately 2 hours, which is the correct ratio for an assembly or dinner party beginning at 8 or 9. Social events in Regency England are not casual. They are structured performances in which everyone present is simultaneously audience and cast, observing and being observed in continuous rotation. You enter a room and are assessed in the first 3 seconds. Your dress, your companion, your posture, and the direction you walk immediately after entering each communicates something specific. You have never formally rehearsed this. You have been practicing it your entire life. Let's talk about what you are actually walking into. The assembly room is lit by hundreds of candles, which sounds romantic and is also approximately 400 degrees. The heat is considerable. The wax is dripping. Somewhere near the far wall, a string quartet is playing a piece that everyone can hear, but nobody is listening to, which is the correct relationship between music and a Regency social event. You can identify the hostess by the angle of her smile, which is warm, fixed, and communicates nothing. Now the room has a structure, and you are expected to understand it without being told. There is the area near the entrance where new arrivals stand briefly to be appraised. There is the centre of the room, which is for circulating and being seen. There is the perimeter, which is for people who have already made their assessment passes and are now processing information. And there is the far corner, near the refreshment table, which is where reputations are quietly reduced to powder, while everyone holds a glass and looks pleasant. You gravitate toward the centre. The centre is the correct choice. Staying near the door too long implies uncertainty. Of course, you know most of the people here. You saw several of them this morning on the promenade, at least 2 of them at the Hargrove Musicale last Tuesday, and one of them has owed your husband £40 since February. None of this is acknowledged. Everyone begins the evening fresh, as though assembled by coincidence in a candlelit room in their finest clothing, with no prior history whatsoever. The fiction is maintained with remarkable collective discipline. This is where the conversational rules become important. You do not discuss money. You do not discuss illness in any genuine detail. You mention your health only to confirm it is excellent, even when it is not, which is most of the time given the candles, the corset, and the ambient anxiety. You may discuss the countryside, recent arrivals in the county, the quality of the season, and horses. Horses are always acceptable. A lengthy discussion of a particular horse has ended many otherwise dangerous conversational tangents, and several people in this room know it. Meanwhile, across the room, the gossip economy is already running. A woman near the window has just said something brief to her companion while looking at someone else entirely, and her companion's expression shifted by a fraction, and that fraction was observed by at least 3 people, and by tomorrow afternoon it will have a narrative attached to it. Nobody takes notes. The retention is astonishing. The speed of distribution would impress a modern courier service, and yet the dancing, when it begins, functions as a brief ceasefire. For the length of a country dance, you are required to concentrate on footwork and sequence, which temporarily suspends active social calculation. This is the closest thing to a rest you will get all evening. You take it seriously. Your feet know the steps. Your face holds its expression. You complete the figure, return to your position, and the room resumes. You are at the card table, which is where the evening's finances are decided, which is to say, where money you do not have is lost to people who also do not have it. Gambling in Regency society is not quite a vice, or rather, it is a vice, but one that is socially mandatory, and arriving at an evening of play unprepared is roughly equivalent to showing up at dinner without shoes. You write IOUs on whatever paper is nearest. Your opponents write IOUs back. These documents circulate through society for months, sometimes years, settling nothing and disturbing nothing. Let's talk about the IOU as a financial instrument. It is, technically, a promise to pay. It is, practically, a small rectangle of paper that gets passed from hand to hand like a very boring baton until everyone forgets whose obligation it was originally. The creditor sends a polite note. You receive the polite note. You leave it on a side table near the door. It stays there until it is covered by another polite note. This is called debt management. Now, the sums involved are not small. Pun. A single evening at cards can produce losses that would fund a village for a year. You know this. The man across the table knows this. Nobody says anything, because saying it would imply that the money is real, and real money is something your steward handles, not you. You have, in this way, developed a genuinely impressive talent for treating enormous financial catastrophe as a scheduling problem. Of course, some debts do eventually surface. Not in dramatic fashion, no one arrives at the door with a ledger. Instead, a letter appears, worded so gently that you have to read it twice to understand it is about money at all. Something like, "I hope this finds you in continued good health, and I wonder if the matter of some weeks past might, at your earliest convenience, be revisited." The matter of some weeks past is £1,200. You write back expressing warm regards and every intention of resolving the matter shortly. Shortly does not have a date on it. Tuka. Salt. This is where the geometry of owing gets interesting. And all enter the tear, where the geometry of owing gets interesting. A modest sum owed to a tradesman is embarrassing. The tailor has a face and he is making it at you right now. A spectacular sum owed to another gentleman is practically a membership badge. You move in circles where these numbers come up. You lose without flinching, or appear to, which takes considerably more practice. The tailor waits. The gentleman does not. Meanwhile, the IOUs keep moving. One changes hands at a dinner party when Lord Somebody settles a separate bet with it instead of cash. Another gets folded into a letter and mailed to a cousin in Bath who has a claim against the original writer. The original writer is now at a different card table, generating new ones. The paper economy hums along entirely parallel to the real one, and occasionally the two intersect in ways that require your steward to make several very uncomfortable visits, and yet the morning after carries its own specific texture. You wake to the smell of candle wax and cold air. Your valet appears. You do not immediately recall the precise total from the previous evening, which is either a mercy or a character flaw depending on who you ask. The steward has opinion on this, and he is keeping it very close. Somewhere in the house there is a small stack of paper with your handwriting on it, currently meaning nothing, eventually meaning something, timing unclear. Your valet hands you your coat. You take it. You are not feeling well. This is unfortunate for the usual reasons, and also for the specific reason that medicine in 1812 has a limited toolkit and a highly confident attitude about using all of it. The doctor arrives, a serious and educated man who has studied the body with genuine dedication and reached several conclusions that are, in retrospect, quite wrong. He examines your tongue, takes your pulse, asks about your digestion and general disposition, and reaches for his bag. The bag contains several things. Once you understand what they are for, none of them are reassuring. Let's talk about blood. The dominant medical theory of the day holds that illness is largely a problem of excess. Too much blood, too much bile, too much of whatever the body is currently producing in surplus. The solution is removal. The doctor produces a small glass cup, or a jar containing leeches, or a lancet, depending on his personal preference and the contents of his bag. He does not see this as dramatic. This is Tuesday. You have, effectively, made an appointment to be drained. Now the leeches. They are kept in a jar, and they have the placid confidence of creatures who know their role. A headache means 3 or 4 leeches applied to the temples. Melancholy means a different application site. Fever means the doctor exercises professional judgment, which is a phrase that will not comfort you, but is meant to. The leeches are not aggressive. They simply get on with it. This is arguably the worst thing about them. Of course, if leeches are not indicated, there is always laudanum. Laudanum is opium dissolved in alcohol, and it is prescribed for anxiety, sleeplessness, low spirits, high spirits, general discomfort, and any situation where the doctor would like you to stop asking questions. It is available over the counter. It is considered mild. It is by any modern pharmacological standard absolutely not mild. The bottle in your medicine chest sits next to the smelling salts and a cough syrup thick enough to patch a leaky roof, and nobody finds this arrangement unusual. Meanwhile, the medicine chest itself deserves a moment. It is a fitted wooden box, lined in velvet, containing vials of camphor, blistering ointments, smelling salts, and enough laudanum to fumigate a small abbey. It is treated with the same reverence as the silverware. Guests do not open it uninvited. The housekeeper holds the key. The chest projects an air of serious, organized competence that its contents do not entirely support. This is where preventative medicine enters the picture. If you are not currently ill, you take steps to remain well. These steps include carrying a small sachet of rosemary in your pocket to ward off bad airs, which is the era's best current theory on how disease travels, or as we'd call it, Googling your symptoms and going with the third result. You also wear red flannel undergarments in cold weather, specifically to warm the liver, which is believed to be the seat of several important bodily processes. Nobody can fully explain the mechanism. Red flannel is warm. The liver is important. The logic is considered sufficient. And yet, even with the rosemary and the flannel and the velvet-lined chest, things occasionally require more direct intervention. For those occasions, surgery exists. It is performed by a surgeon, a different and slightly lower status professional than your physician, on whatever flat surface is available, which in a domestic setting is frequently the kitchen table. Instruments are wiped on an apron. Candles provide the light. Brandy provides the anesthesia, administered to the patient in advance, and by some accounts, also to the surgeon. Speed is the primary surgical virtue. You are strongly encouraged to remain still. Nobody mentions this, is because there are no other options. The doctor packs his bag, writes a note recommending rest and mild broth, and possibly a second bleeding on Thursday, and accepts his fee with quiet dignity. He has done everything he knows to do. He has done it with total conviction. He leaves, and you lie back against the pillow with a bandaged arm and a measured dose of laudanum beginning to make the ceiling gently interesting. You are being bled. The treatment is bloodletting not because your specific illness calls for it, but because the treatment is largely the same regardless of what the illness is. The medical consensus in 1812 is that most illness results from an excess of blood in the body, and the correct response is to remove some. This can be done with a lancet, which is fast, or with leeches, which are thorough and require decisions about placement. You have seen leeches before, in the abstract, as things that live in ponds. You are about to have a more direct relationship with one. The physician arrives carrying a small leather case. He opens it with the quiet confidence of a man who has never once been wrong, which is functionally the same thing as never having been questioned. Inside the case, a lancet, a porcelain bleeding bowl, and a cloth that has seen better days and worse patients. He asks you to describe your symptoms. You describe them. He nods. He was going to bleed you either way. Now, the leech itself is about the size of a thumb and does not ask for your consent. It is placed with deliberate care. There are protocols, and once it attaches, the physician steps back and watches it work with the same professional detachment a contractor uses when surveying tile. It does not hurt. Precisely. It is more of a sustained moral inconvenience. The bowl fills slowly. The physician makes a note. This is where the logic gets complicated. If you feel worse after the bloodletting, that is evidence that you needed more blood removed. If you feel better, the bloodletting worked. If you feel about the same, you will probably be bled again on Thursday. The system is airtight. The blood removed today is considered excessive, diseased, or simply in the wrong place, a kind of circulatory filing error that only a lancet can correct. Your body in this framework is basically a poorly organized cabinet. This is in modern terms, leaving a 5-star review after the problem gets worse. Of course there are variations. A headache calls for leeches placed at the temples. Fever calls for arm bleeding performed briskly. Melancholy calls for laudanum first, bloodletting second, and a strong recommendation that you go outside more, which is delivered without irony by a man who has just drained several ounces of blood from your forearm. For digestive complaints, the approach depends on what the physician had for breakfast. Nobody states this, but it is functionally true. Meanwhile, the leech completes its work and detaches on its own schedule, which is one of the few things in this household that operates without being told. The physician wraps your arm with linen. He instructs you to rest, avoid excitement, and take a light meal of broth. He will return tomorrow to assess progress. His fee is settled with the steward. He departs, satisfied. You are left lighter in 2 distinct senses, and the day continues as planned. The bleeding bowl is removed by a housemaid, who has seen this often enough to carry it without expression. The physician's visit has taken 40 minutes. You feel if anything, slightly cold. You have a household medicine chest, and it contains enough remedies to treat the county, if treating means applying something to the problem and hoping for the best. There are vials of smelling salts for fainting, which occurs at a frequency suggesting the early 19th century is a genuinely startling place to live. There is camphor for chest complaints, a cough syrup so dense it could cork a window, blistering ointments for what the syrup cannot address, and laudanum, opium dissolved in alcohol, for everything else. You open the chest, examine the options, and choose the one whose label you can still read. Let's talk about the laudanum. It is prescribed for melancholy, hysteria, insomnia, nervousness, a persistent cough, a non-persistent cough, and the general sensation that things are not going well. It is opium in a bottle, available from the apothecary, stocked in respectable households beside the candles and the writing paper, and administered by the spoonful to adults, children, and, in at least some documented cases, restless dogs. Your physician recommends it. Your neighbour swears by it. The bottle is half empty and you have not checked the date, because there is no date. Now the smelling salts. These are for fainting, which is considered a reasonable response to bad news, tight stays, warm rooms, upsetting letters, and also good news delivered too suddenly. The salts are ammonia-based, which means the treatment for losing consciousness is to force something that smells like a stable fire directly under the nose of the unconscious person until they revive out of pure objection. It works, in the same sense that being shouted at works. You keep a vial in your reticule as a precaution. The cough syrup deserves a separate moment. Ombov. It is thick, dark, and faintly bitter, and it coats the throat in a way that suggests the recipe was originally intended for waterproofing boots. It contains alcohol, various plant extracts, a quantity of sugar that would concern a modern dentist. Assuming the modern dentist was not already concerned about everything else happening in this century, and possibly a small amount of laudanum, because the era regarded laudanum as a seasoning, which is basically putting opiates in the medicine the way we put caffeine in everything. You take a spoonful, it does not taste like medicine. It tastes like a decision. Of course, the chest also contains blistering ointments, which are applied to the skin deliberately to raise a blister, on the theory that drawing fluid to the surface removes whatever internal complaint is causing the problem. This is the medical equivalent of fixing a broken window by opening another window. It is prescribed for fevers, infections, joint pain, and congestion, and produces, reliably, a blister. Whether it produces anything else is a matter of ongoing optimism. Meanwhile, tucked behind the ointments and wedged between a small jar of camphor and a linen sachet of rosemary carried to ward off bad airs, which are believed to cause illness by simply existing near you, there is a packet of red flannel. You are meant to wear it against the skin to keep the liver warm. The liver, in early 19th century medical theory, is doing a significant amount of explanatory work. Sluggish liver. Overheated liver. Amdashi. Liver requiring flannel. The liver is essentially the household steward of your body, blamed for everything and consulted on nothing, which is, in modern terms, basically just blaming your gut health. The chest locks with a small brass key you keep on your person, not because you fear theft exactly, but because the footman has been looking tired lately, and the laudanum bottle was measurably lower than expected last Tuesday. Nobody has mentioned this. The chest sits on the writing table in a posture of quiet authority, latched and waiting, the way all genuinely alarming things tend to wait. You have had a tooth bothering you for 2 weeks, which means it is time to see the barber surgeon. The barber surgeon is not a dentist. The distinction matters less than you might hope, because the procedure, in either case, involves a pair of dental forceps and a determination to resolve the situation in one attempt. There is no anaesthetic, There is a suggestion to hold very still, delivered with the calm of someone who has said it many times before. The extraction is brief, conclusive, and not something you would schedule a second time if any alternative existed. Let's talk about what preceded this appointment. You tried the medicine chest first. You applied the camphor. You held warm brandy against the tooth, which is technically medicinal and also technically just holding brandy in your mouth, which you did for longer than was strictly necessary. You consulted the cook, who recommended oil of cloves, which helped for approximately 40 minutes. Then it stopped helping, and here you are, in a chair that was not designed for comfort or dignity. The barber-surgeon's room smells of soap, iron, and something you don't examine too closely. The instruments are laid out on a cloth in an arrangement that is almost reassuring, the way a neat desk suggests competence, regardless of the person sitting behind it. The forceps are steel, hinged, and sized for the job. They have been used before. You know this because the barber-surgeon handles them with the unhurried ease of someone who is not worried about how this goes. Now, the extraction itself takes less than a minute. You will not be given a countdown. You will be told to open wide, feel a grip that could loosen a carriage bolt, and then it is over. The tooth comes out. There is blood. The barber-surgeon says something brisk and practical, wraps a cloth around a small pad of lint, and hands it to you. He moves on. He has 3 more appointments this afternoon. Of course, the replacement question comes next. If you are wealthy enough to afford a good set of false teeth, and you are, you have options. Ivory is common, bone is cheaper. Then there is the third category, which is teeth, pulled from the recently deceased and fitted to a carved base, which was a recognized and available product sold without apparent irony. These are called Waterloo teeth, after their primary supply chain, which was battlefields. You smile carefully in candlelight from now on. Meanwhile, the fitting process for false teeth involves a wax mold, several adjustments, and a finished product that fits adequately at rest and shifts unpredictably at dinner. You learn to eat on one side. You learn which foods to refuse on social grounds that are actually structural grounds. You develop a preference for soft things. Your steward, who tracks household expenses, notes an uptick in custard. Preventative dental advice, such as it exists, includes rubbing the gums with a cloth, rinsing with salt water, and avoiding too much sugar. Advice that arrives approximately 30 years after the sugar habit has already been established at every meal, every tea, and every celebratory occasion in the house. The tooth that just came out had been in daily contact with sweetened everything since childhood. Nobody connects these facts out loud. The barber-surgeon wipes the forceps on a cloth, sets them back on the tray, and asks if there are any other concerns. There are not. You leave with a gap where the tooth was, a small folded paper of instructions you will not fully follow, and a bill that is, given what just happened, surprisingly reasonable. The chair is already being prepared for the next person. You need surgery, which means the procedure moves to the kitchen. Surgery in 1812 takes place wherever there is a flat surface and sufficient candlelight, and the kitchen table, large, stable, easy to wipe down, is the preferred venue. Instruments are boiled when there is time and wiped on a clean apron when there is not. Your anesthetic is brandy, delivered in a quantity proportional to the seriousness of what is about to happen. The surgeon works quickly, because speed is the primary surgical virtue in an era before pain management. His record is, by the standards of the time, considered respectable. Let's talk about what speed means here. A skilled Regency surgeon can amputate a limb in under 2 minutes. This is not a boast, it is a survival strategy, because the longer the procedure takes, the higher the chance of shock, blood loss, or you simply changing your mind mid-table. You are given no choice about the pace. The brandy is doing its best, which is to say, it is doing very little, but it gives everyone present something to focus on, other than what is happening. The surgeon's instruments arrive in a leather roll. There are saws. There are probes. There is a tool that looks like it was designed for an entirely different profession, and ended up here through a series of unfortunate decisions. The cook has been asked to leave the kitchen, which she has done, but she is standing immediately outside the door. She has opinions about the kitchen table being used this way, and will be expressing them later, at length. Now, the question of infection is technically on the table, in the sense that so is everything else. Germ theory does not exist yet. The surgeon wipes his hands on a cloth. When wounds go bad afterward, this is attributed to bad air, constitutional weakness, or bad luck, roughly in that order, with bad luck doing a lot of heavy lifting. He is not being careless. This is the protocol. Of course, if the surgery goes wrong, the medicine chest is nearby. It contains smelling salts, camphor, blistering ointments and laudanum, which is opium dissolved in alcohol and prescribed for pain, melancholy, anxiety, and situations where the doctor is not entirely sure what else to suggest. The laudanum is genuinely effective. This is the most functional item in the chest. The blistering ointments are applied to the skin to draw out whatever is causing the problem, on the theory that the body needs to be provoked into healing. They do not work. They are very painful. They are prescribed anyway. Meanwhile, bloodletting remains the default response to almost any post-surgical complication. You have a fever, too much blood. You are pale and weak. Also too much blood, somehow. A healthy adult in 1812 might be bled 4 or 5 times in a single year as routine maintenance. This is the medical equivalent of resolving every computer problem by turning off the power to the whole building. The surgeon trained under someone who trained under someone else, and somewhere in that chain the information stopped being updated. He has seen worse outcomes than yours. He says this, actually, while washing his hands. It is meant to be reassuring. You receive it in the spirit in which it was intended, which requires some effort. The cook is let back in 20 minutes after the procedure ends. She surveys the kitchen table without comment. She asks that a message be sent the next time this is required, so she can at minimum remove the bread. You maintain an estate that produces income and a household that spends it, and the gap between these two facts is a number your steward knows and you have chosen not to ask about directly. This is not as unusual as it sounds. Regency aristocrats are not anxious about money the way people without money are anxious. They experience it differently, as a kind of ambient awareness that the system sustaining all of this depends on entail, tenant rents, and the assumption that this season will not be more expensive than the last one. It is almost always more expensive than the last one. Let's talk about the steward. He is a quiet man with excellent posture and a leather-bound ledger that he never leaves unattended. He manages the tenant accounts, pays the household suppliers, negotiates with the chandler and the coal merchant, and writes the letters to creditors that are just apologetic enough to delay collection without actually promising anything. You have not looked at the ledger in 4 months. The ledger is, by all accounts, concerned. Now, the expenses themselves. This season's accounting includes 2 new London gowns, 1 set of Parisian boots ordered on the recommendation of someone whose name you cannot remember, seasonal lace curtains for the east-facing rooms, new wallpaper in the blue drawing room because the old wallpaper developed an opinion you disagreed with, and candles. An extraordinary number of candles. Your household burns through candles the way a less prosperous household burns through optimism. Of course, there is the gambling. Card debts from last month are still circulating as IOUs, which is the Regency equivalent of paying your credit card bill with a different credit card, except the interest is social rather than financial, and the consequences arrive at parties. A note came from one creditor last Tuesday. It was beautifully worded. You left it on the hall table, which is where correspondence goes to be politely forgotten. It is still there. This is where debt becomes interesting. Half the men at your club owe money to the other half, and the whole arrangement keeps rotating like a very slow wheel that everyone has agreed not to examine too closely. Someone always inherits, eventually. Someone always marries well. A man who owes £30,000 is not in trouble, he is, briefly, between arrangements. The wheel turns. Meanwhile, the estate itself is technically sound. The tenant farms produce reliable income. The timber stands are healthy. There is a mill. Your steward has mentioned the mill 3 times this quarter in a tone that suggests you should ask about the mill, and each time you have responded with a brief nod and changed the subject to something more comfortable, like the weather or your boots. And yet, underneath the income and the IOUs and the steward's carefully maintained silence, there is something else. Not panic. Panic is for people who have fewer rooms, but a low, persistent awareness that this requires maintenance, that the whole architecture of this life is load-bearing in ways that do not advertise themselves. The estate needs the rents. The rents need the tenants. The tenants need the harvest. The harvest needs the weather. You look out at the sky this morning with the specific expression of a man who has just realized he is, at some structural level, dependent on clouds. Your steward will have a full accounting ready in March. You will thank him warmly and set it beside the creditor's note on the hall table. You end the day having been dressed by 2 people, walked a prescribed route for the benefit of observers, eaten a breakfast that was mostly strategic, and attended a function where you performed a version of yourself that was correct and not entirely real. The house ran itself. The steward handled the money. The servants managed every practical need. You were present for all of it and responsible for almost none of it. The day was full. You cannot quite account for where it went. There is no word, in 1812, for feeling very comfortable and quietly unnecessary. Let's talk about what you actually did today. You approved a menu you did not cook. You wore clothes you did not press. You rode to a park you did not maintain, along a path you did not plan, on a horse someone else groomed. At the card table, you lost a sum that would keep a tenant family fed for 6 months, and you signed a note for it with a pen someone handed you. The note will be ignored. The tenant family does not know they are a unit of comparison. Nobody in this room is making comparisons. Now, this is not unique to you. Everyone at that card table did the same thing. You spent the evening performing interesting conversations you had already had in slightly different furniture. You stood near the fireplace and said something about Parliament or the weather in France, because that is what the fireplace section of the room requires. The version of yourself you brought tonight was polished, correct, and tiresomely familiar. You have worn it so many times it has started to fit like a well-maintained cravat, impeccably constructed and slightly difficult to breathe in. The servants, meanwhile, have had a full day of a different kind. The kitchen ran hot from 5 in the morning. The housemaids hauled water, blacked grates, carried coals, and changed linens. The footmen stood at attention for 4 hours during dinner service and were not permitted to shift their weight. The butler walked the same patrol route so many times that the floorboards have formed an opinion about it. Every one of them goes to bed, knowing exactly what got done. The ledger of that day is legible. Of course, you did not choose this. The house was built before you arrived. The calendar was already full. There is a season for London and a season for the country and a correct week for Bath, which is where reputations go to either recover or finish collapsing, depending on who arrives first. The schedule is full. The schedule has always been full. It does not leave gaps where the quieter questions could fit. And yet here you are at the end of it, in a bedroom that smells of rosewater and cold candle wax, with a lady's maid unhooking 17 buttons, while you stare at a ceiling that cost more to plaster than most people earn in a year. The house is large. The house is very large. You have not been in 3 of the rooms since autumn. One of them contains a harpsichord nobody plays. The harpsichord does not seem troubled by this. It has been silent for 8 months and retains complete structural confidence. There is no diagnosis for what you have. The doctor would prescribe laudanum, or a change of air, or a tonic made of something brown that smells like a harbour. The medicine chest has 6 things in it, and none of them are relevant. The smelling salts are for fainting. You are not fainting. You are simply awake at the end of a very managed day, in the middle of a very managed life, trying to locate the part of it that was yours. The candle goes out. The maid withdraws. The house settles around you with the quiet confidence of a building that knows it will outlast everyone currently inside it. Tomorrow the schedule begins again at 7, and so ends one gilded, exhausting, medically questionable day. In Regency England, you woke up in a cold room attended by 3 people. You tied something complicated around your neck. You competed with a peacock, survived breakfast, and ignored at least 4 letters from creditors. The gossip table found you. The medicine chest found you. The steward told you something about money that you declined to process. And somewhere below stairs, a butler with a ring of keys knew every single thing about you and said nothing. To everyone who actually lived this, who hauled those basins, tied those cravats, managed those debts, and smiled carefully in candlelight, you were navigating something genuinely difficult while making it look effortless. That is not a small thing. You, meanwhile, have running water, central heating, teeth that belong to you, a mattress no one had to stuff with horsehair this morning. Settle deeper into your pillow. Let it all go quiet. Sleep well.